Hello, welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Wicked. So, the next part of the Gillikin is called The Charmed Circle, Chapter 1. There was no doubt in the minds of anyone who had seen the corpse that the correct word was murder. The way the pelt around the neck had bunched up, caked together like an improperly cleaned worker's paint rust, the raw amber hollow in the eye. The official story was that the doctor had broken a magnifying lens and stumbled against it, cutting an artery in the process, but nobody believed it. The only one they could think of to ask, Alma Clutch, merely smiled when they came to visit with handfuls of pretty yellow leaves or a plate of late Bertha grapes. She devoured the grapes and chatted the leaves. It was an ailment no one had ever seen before. Galinda, for out of some belated apology for her initial rudeness to the martyred goat, she now called herself as he had once called her. Galinda seemed to be stricken dumb for the fact that Alma Clutch, Galinda, shouldn't visit nor discuss the poor one's condition, so Elphaba sneaked in once or twice a day. Boq assumed that Alma Clutch suffered a passing malady, but after 3 weeks, Madame Morrible began to make sounds of concerns that of Elphaba and Galinda, still roomies, had no chaperone. She suggested the common dormitory for them both. Glinda, who would no longer see Madame Morrible on her own, nodded and accepted the denomination. It was Elphaba who came up with a solution, mostly to salvage some shred of Glinda's dignity. Thus, it was 10 days later, Boq found himself in the beer garden of the Cock and Pumpkins, waiting for the midweek coach from the Emerald City. Madame Morrible didn't allow Elphaba and Glinda to join him, so he decided for himself which of the two of the 7 passengers alighting were Nanny and Nessarose. The deformities of Elphaba's sisters were well concealed. Elphaba had warned him. No, Nessarose could even descend from a carriage with grapes, providing the step was secure and the ground was flat. He met them and said hello. Nanny was a stewed plum of a woman, red and loose, her old skin looking ready to trail off but for the trucks at the corner of her mouth, the fleshy rivets by the edges of her eyes. More than a score of years in the Badlands of Quadling country had made her lethargic, careless, saturated with resentment. At her age, she ought to have been allowed to nod off with some warm, chinny nook. "Good to see a little Munchkinlander," she murmured to Boq. "It's like the old times." And then she turned and said to the shadows, "Come, my puppet." Had he not been warned, Boq wouldn't have taken Nessarose as Elphaba's sister. She was by no means green, or even blue-white like a genteel person with bad circulation. Nessarose stepped from the carriage, elegantly, gingerly, sinking her heel to touch the iron step at the same time as her toe. Walking as oddly as she did, she drew attention to her feet, which kept eyes away from the torso, at least the first. The feet landed on the ground, driven there with ferocious intent to balance, and Nessarose stood before him. She was, as Elphaba had, gorgeous, pink, slender as a wheat stalk, and armless. The academic shawl over her shoulder was cunningly folded to soften the shock. "Hello, good sheriff," she said, nodding her head very slightly. "The valets are on top. Can you manage?" Her voice was smooth and oiled as Elphaba's was serrated. Nanny propelled Nessarose gently toward the handsome cab that Boq had engaged. He saw that Nessarose did not move well without being able to lean against a steadying hand. "So now Nanny has to see the girls through their schooling," said Nanny to Boq as they rode along. "What with their sainted mother in her waterlogged grave these long years, and their father off his head. Well, the family was bright, and brightness, as you know, decays brilliantly. Madness is the most shining way. The elderly man, the eminent Throp, he's still alive, and it's sensible as an old plowshare, surviving his daughter and granddaughter. Elphaba is the Throp third descending. She'll be the eminence one day. As a Munchkinlander, you know about such things." "Nanny, don't gossip. It hurts my soul," Nessarose said. "Oh, pretty, don't you fret. This Boq is an old friend, or as good as, said Nanny. Out in the swamps of Quaddling Hell, my friend. We've lost the art of conversation. We've croaked in chorus with what's left of the froggy folk. I intend to have a headache from shame, said Nessarose charmingly. But I know Elfie when she was a small thing, said Boq. I'm from Rush Margins and Wend Hardings. I must have met you too. Primarily, I prefer to reside at Coling Ground, said Nanny. I was a mortal comfort to the Lady Partra, the Throp's second descending. But occasionally, I visited Rush Margin, so I met you when you were young enough to rush around without trousers. How do you do, said Nessarose. The name is Boq, said Boq. This is Nessarose, said Nanny, as if it were too painful for the girl to introduce herself. She was to come up to Shiz next year, but we have learned there's a problem with some Gillikinese minder going loopy. So Nanny is called to step in. And can Nanny leave her sleep? You see why not. A sad mystery. We hope for improvement, said Boq. At Crate Hall, Boq witnessed the reunion of the sisters, which was warm and gratifying. Madame Morrible had her grommatic wheel out to tea and brisk for the Throp females. And for Nanny and Glinda, Boq, who had begun to worry about Galinda's retreat into silence, was relieved to see Glinda cast a hard, appraising eye over the elegant dress of Nessarose. How can it be, he wondered, if Galinda was worrying that two sisters should be disfigured and should clothe themselves so alike? Elphaba wore the humblest of dark frocks. Today she was in a deep purple, almost a black. Nessarose balanced on a sofa next to Nanny, who was assisted by lifting teacups and crunching buttery bits of crumpet. It was in green silks, the color of moss, emerald, and yellow-green roses. Green Elphaba, sitting on her side and lending her support between the shoulders as she tilted her head back to sip her tea, looked like a fashion accessory. The whole arrangement is highly unusual, Madame Morrible was saying, but we don't have unlimited room to accommodate peculiarities. We'll leave Miss Elphaba and Miss Galinda. Glinda now, is it, dear? How novel. We'll leave these two old pals as they are, and we'll see you up in this Nessarose with your Nanny in the adjoining room that poor old Alma Clutch had. It's small, but you must think of it as cozy. But when Alma Clutch recovers, asked Galinda. Okay, but my dear, said Madame Morrible, such confidence the young have. Touching, really, she continued in a more steely voice. You've already told me of a long-standing recurrence of this unusual medical condition. I can only assume this deteriorated into a permanent lapse. She munched a biscuit in her slow, fishy way, her cheeks going in and out like leather flaps of a bellows. Of course we can all hope. Not much more than that, I'm afraid. And we can pray, Nessarose said. Oh, well, yes, that, said the head. There goes without saying, among people of good breeding, Miss Nessarose. Boq watched Nessarose and Elphaba both blush. Galinda excused herself and went away. The usual pang of panic Boq felt at her departure was softened by knowing he would see her again in life sciences next week. For with new prohibitions on animal hiring, the colleges had decided to give assembly lectures to all the students from colleges at once. Boq could see Galinda at the first coeducation lecture ever held at Shiz. He couldn't wait. Though she had changed, she had surely changed. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. See you later.